By the time the doctors finally handed him his discharge papers on the afternoon of the fourth day, Tal figured he would spend one more evening in the city of naysayers before driving back into the mountains, just to wash his clothes and organize a few other things, like buying guitar strings and some drugs. Nothing fancy, really. Tal wasn't sure why he loved this town flat so much. He just knew he couldn't take to stay there for more than a night tops. Although he had taken down and thrown out Hannah's pictures a couple of weeks before, there were still too many things which must have reminded him of her, and of the time during which he had believed they would get back together one day. A few months earlier, during an interview, Tal had been asked, "What's the first thing you'd save if your house was on fire?" To which he responded with hesitation, "My photo albums from the past 5 years." And although Tal wouldn't have changed his attitude towards perceiving his photo albums as some of his most treasured possessions, he could no longer stand looking at them. That's how depressing that was. That's how depressing the thought alone of seeing all the smiling faces was to him, since he felt like nothing much of that was left in his life. Regardless of how wasted he'd get during this time, he'd still be too sober to find some peace. But I guess you are plenty familiar with this never ending undertow by now. Anyhow, he seized the moment to pay a visit to the town he had left behind a couple of weeks earlier. He would take pictures of the blossoming magnolias on Main Square. Dwelling on the past, his time there would burn out like a couple of cigarettes. As aspiringly hopeless as Tal was, he even sent Hannah a photo of the magnolias. It would have been kind of wrong not to send her one, seeing how the two of them had always spent a lot of time there during this season. What really bugged Tal was how both of them began to know less and less about the other's life. She had no clue whatsoever that he had just spent almost a week at the mental clinic. Some same as he had no clue what would be going on in her life, and that really took its toll on him. He wasn't ready for the world to keep turning. He wouldn't stop his obsessive complaining about how the end of the relationship was, but the natural consequence of maintaining a system which encourages you to just throw away everything that's broken without ever trying to fix it. Like, why would you care when you can just get something or someone new? That's just this attitude would always make Tal mad. This year was supposed to be the one for Tal. During springtime, it became rather clear to him how he wouldn't have lost everything before the first snow had settled on the mountain's tops. His suicidal tendencies sadly weren't news to anyone anymore. Everything and nothing alike couldn't have turned the tide for him. Really, his agony had become a part of him, ultimately unbound by outside influences. Around the time fall came crashing in, Tal's escape plan had cemented into an inevitable certainty. The one thing he couldn't seem to wrap his head around was who to burden with discovering his lifeless body. Up for consideration were Hanna, his estranged girlfriend, and Yanis, my humble self, a long-time and close friend of Tal's. Despite thinking that I might have been capable of handling seeing him in such state, Tal felt like he didn't want to pass the torture trauma on to me. Then again, Tal wouldn't have felt less remorseful in burdening Hannah with finding him, given their dysfunctional relationship. Months in advance, to diligently prepare for his departure, Tal was stockpiling all the sleeping pills and even prescription-only psychotropic medication he could get his hands on. Almost if he was cherishing sorting through his endless pile of pills, he would compare his stash to an insurance for leaving. This time Tal would make sure that nothing went wrong. Unlike the two times before, there was not going to be a third attempt, only a final resolution. It didn't strike Tal as much of a surprise when the end came closing in even sooner than he'd expected. Although he was always prepared for the worst, when Hannah said the words and officially ended their relationship, Tal couldn't help but feel even more broken. You must know, he was never any good at letting people he cared for vanish from his life. Quite the contrary. Tal would loyally treasure every friendship and relationship, regardless of how healthy or unhealthy, functional or dysfunctional. I firmly believe that Tal would have never broken up their relationship, though he might have occasionally played with the idea of leaving Hannah whenever he was high on cocaine or more drunk than usual. I think he never would have seen through. He simply couldn't have pulled it off. That would have been against his nature. Cocaine, yeah, has become a reliable companion of Tal's over the past couple of years. Regardless of how dire the situation he found himself in, Snow would have never let him down, even only making his life more bearable for a few hours. Drinking and doing drugs, yeah, had turned into a staple of Tal's life. Even though he was continuously reluctant to admit this fact, I'm sure Tal was aware of it too. As goes any cliche of artists and musicians, of course, neither Tal nor his social circle found drug abuse, sometimes on a daily and sometimes on a weekly basis, off. Oftentimes, sniffing cocaine would jokingly be referred to as nourishing your body through your nostrils, but I digress. We'll have to rewind to the start of the story, to that one Thursday last October, the day on which Tal had his heart crushed by Hannah. It's hard to say what's left of a person, and especially a lugubrious person like Tal, when their everything is taken away. It really comes as no surprise that Tal went to a dark place afterwards. Although darkness had been always been a familiar acquaintance of Tal's, this time had been different. This time he was even more deprived of hope and light. Yet strangely, he wouldn't stop to feel drawn towards this darkness. He obviously grew aware of how he might not have been the best partner and friend for some time, feeling shameful in considering himself a disappointment to the ones he loved. He couldn't take it any longer, as he was the center of an undertow that devoured everything.